All right, Alexander, we have got to do an update on what's going on in the UK. UK economy, talk about how Liz Truss, the new UK Prime Minister, is doing. And she started to govern, I guess, after the events surrounding the passing of the Queen. It looks like that she has now started to govern the UK, and boy, does she have quite a job ahead of her. What is the latest?
Well, the latest is that the government has now published its budget. I mean, the new Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng, who everybody sees as the brains of the operation. There's been lots of programmes on British television and British radio telling us what an extremely clever man Mr. Kwarteng is. I mean, lots and lots of programmes about the fact that he has a brain the size of a planet, that he got degrees from Cambridge University, that he studied in, I think it was Harvard, that he's, a prodigiously clever man who remembers telephone numbers and never writes notes down and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so he's presented his budget, and we're told that it is completely unorthodox, that it violates every conceivable economic rule. What he's doing is he's cutting taxes. He's cutting taxes radically. He's increasing spending radically, or at least maintaining spending radically. He's also, of course, going to provide huge amounts of financial aid, £150 billion of financial aid to people to control their fuel bills. We are told that this is a huge break with Treasury orthodoxy, with economic orthodoxy. All I will say is it reminds me massively of the policies pursued by the Biden administration in the first year of the administration. Spend, 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 spend. It's the money-making machine now in full operation. It goes into high gear at a time, of course, when the Bank of England is raising interest rates, at a time when the economy is already believed to be in recession by many people, and at a time also when there is major pressure on the exchange rate, when sterling is falling. And the argument, the theory is that all of these policies are going to turbocharge growth. We're going to get red hot growth and, enormous growth, and this will enable Britain to surge through its problems. If you remember, Biden, the first year of his administration, was telling us exactly the same thing, that we're going to have a double-digit growth. We were going to outgrow China. We were going to move forward into this huge age of high-speed prosperity. And of course, what we got instead was high-speed inflation. And that's what I predict we're going to get in Britain.
Okay, so why are they going along with this?
I'm going to tell you
They
straight.
understand. I would imagine they understand the outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, imagine there's some smart people there.
Yeah, well,
Why
I
are they
think
going
so.
along with this? Why are they doing this?
Right. Well, there's two reasons. Firstly, I think Biden and his people, I think Kwarteng has probably listened to too many economists of a certain school who tell him, you can spend money and cut taxes and do all of these things, and you don't need to worry because, we'll always find the money to cover any possible need. You can always borrow it or print it or do whatever you want with it. And, modern monetary theory and all of that. He is, I know him slightly. He's very academic minded. I think, if I have to say, he is closer to an academic than any chancellor, any other finance minister I can think of since Varoufakis. I'll hold on to that thought. So I think he has that perspective. He's attracted to these interesting economic ideas. So that's the first thing to say. But there is a very simple political calculus, and that is that Liz Truss has become Prime Minister. She will want to consolidate her position quickly. She will want to call an election. The Conservatives are at the moment well behind in the opinion polls. So what you do, you goose up the economy, you create a boom, you make people feel well, you give the impression that things are going well, you call the election, you win, and well, after that there might be the crash, but then what does that matter? Liz will still be Prime Minister for 5 years or whatever it was, and Kwasi was a bit Chancellor during that time. By the way, I have to say this. If you look at British history, modern British history, Conservative governments especially have a habit of doing this thing. All the way back to the 50s, they sort of cut taxes, increase spending, launch an economic splurge, talk about a boom, call an election, win the election, and whatever problem there is afterwards, well, you can sort it out after the election. Back in the 50s, this was called stop go. In the 70s and 80s, it was called boom and bust. So this is not entirely new, but that's, in my opinion, what it is. The great difference is that the economic fabric of the country is much more fragile this time. And I don't know whether Truss and Kwarteng really understand that.
Yeah. First of all, it doesn't sound, the policies that you're describing, they do not sound very conservative to me. But this seems to be the wrong time to be going back to this boom bust formula. It just doesn't seem like the UK is in a position right now, given everything that's happening in the world, to proceed with a boom bust type of plan. What should the UK be doing?
Okay, right. I mean, first of all, on your very first point, there is nothing conservative about these policies. If a Labour government was trying to implement these policies, I mean, even the Conservatives would be jumping up and down, and they'd be saying that these policies are ludicrous. And you're absolutely right. There's nothing conservative about them, and we should put any idea that you should put the idea aside that there is anything conservative about these policies. And you're absolutely right also that this is the worst possible time to be implementing these policies if your concern is not with the electoral prospects of Liz Truss, but with the economic stability of Britain. What should Britain be doing? Well, there is one thing they need to do, but of course none of them are doing, not just the British, no one else is doing it. They should be talking to Putin, to the Russians, about pulling back on the sanctions, getting the oil and the gas and the food and the fertilizer and all of these things working again, because this is a supply side crisis. I think they should also be leaving taxes where they are. Even if you start getting oil, gas, all of these things moving again, then you're going to need anyway a period of time to raise interest rates in order to squash this terrible inflation that Biden and his cronies launched upon the world back in 2021. So a conservative fiscal policy, a policy of higher interest rates, and a retreat on sanctions. Any chance of any of those?
Nope. Impossible.
Impossible.
It'd be possible, very easy to do if you ask me.
Yeah.
The political fallout for them is unacceptable, but it's very easy to talk to the Russians. Pick up the phone and say, look, we effed up. As the UK, we messed up, and let's roll bak all these sanctions, but they'll never do it. No. So they're going to do the reverse, and they're going to escalate. And my final question is, what if and what could the Russians do to continue to sink the UK economy?
Well, why do the Russians need to do anything? We're busy sinking our own economy without any help from
Well,
them.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah,
but I mean, no,
in
seriously,
general,
I'll tell you
like
what.
what things could happen. What things could happen further to sink.
Right. There are a number of things the Russians can do, and I think, by the way, they will start to do them before very long. I mean, believe it or not, there is still some gas flowing from Russia to Europe. And that's important. I mean, it's still making a certain difference. I've heard, now I can't confirm that this is correct, but I've actually heard that, all that gas in the underground gas reserves, you can actually only bring it out of those gas reserves if there's pressure of gas going into the reserves. That this is a technical thing. I don't know whether this is true or not, by the way. Perhaps somebody in the program knows. But one way or the other, the Russians could cut off all remaining gas going to Europe. Now, the British have pretended that they don't import gas directly from Russia. I think one thing that we've seen clearly over the last few weeks is that that's absolute hokum. Even if we don't in theory, in practice we do, because we import gas from Europe, and that ultimately has to be Russian gas. And we are anyway connected with the Russian gas market. So the Russians can stop supplying gas to Europe, but they have all kinds of other things that they could do. One of the things that they could do, for example, is restrict sales of uranium. They're, I believe, the world's biggest uranium supplier. I believe they account for something like 40% of the market. Nuclear power depends on uranium. There's nuclear power plants all over the world. The remaining 60%, there's going to be a fight over who will take that. No guarantee it'll all go to Europe. So you get more pressures on European, energy production. And there's already apparently major problems with the nuclear power plants in France. And I've heard some rumours that there are problems with the nuclear power plants in Britain as well. Germany, of course, is closing its nuclear power plants. And of course, there's one other thing that the Russians could do. And it's hinted at by some of the things that Putin has said. Putin is saying that all that Ukrainian grain, which you were hearing about, going to the countries of the global south, it's actually going to the European Union, and this is somehow contradicting the terms of that original agreement. And Putin is also complaining that the European Union has not honoured its promise to allow unrestricted export of Russian food and fertilizer. So Russia could pull out of that agreement with Ukraine, perhaps before very long, if events in Ukraine take a certain direction. It won't be physically possible to export food from Ukraine anyway. Given that it does seem that most of that food is heading to Europe, another explosion in food prices in Europe. Again, it will affect Britain. Now, Britain is not part of the European Union. The Russians are not as involved in Britain as they are in the European Union. But it's very clear that because of the linkages built up over those 40 years, when we were part of the European Union, we are intimately and deeply involved in what happens in Europe. And as Europe spirals downwards, they're pulling us in their wake.
Okay, well, just pick up the phone and call Putin.
Yeah, it's so easy.
Not going to happen. Anyway. Yeah. All right. TheDurant.locals.com and the Durant shop. 10% off. Use the code GOODDAY. Take care.